Lord Shiva is known as one of the three deities who govern all the living beings in our local universe. His brothers are Brahman and Vishnu. Lord Shiva represents one of the three gunas, the forces of nature, and Shiva represents the Tamas guna, the inertia and eventually destruction, dissolution. Brahman represents Rajas guna, action, movement, creation, and Lord Vishnu embodies Sattva guna, preservation, love, harmony. Every one of them has their second half, and the second half of Lord Shiva is his wife Parvati, and they have a son, very famous deity called Ganesha, the elephant-headed deity of obstacle removal. And their abode of Shiva and Parvati is known as Shiva Lok. So to give you a visual representation, I will share my screen and we can have a look all together at our universe. Our Earth is here in the middle planes. In the lower planes, there are quite a few more, and there are higher planes as well of some of the heavens, seven sages, and Lord Brahma's abode. And here we may see that Lord Shiva is right here. It's one of the aspects governing our universe, including the goddesses and other all deities. Now, most of the Hindu tradition focuses on this aspect of Shiva as the Lord of the universe. But as we know, this universe is not the only one, and there are many other material universes, Brahmandas. And one of the higher aspects of Shiva is the entry to Shiva consciousness, as we may say, which then is considered as enlightenment. And in the same way, it's called BrahmaJyoti, the light of Brahman. And here we may see that jnana yogis attain this enlightenment of Shiva consciousness or BrahmaJyoti, and they mostly call it the self. However, there is a higher aspect of Shiva which is hidden, and it's beyond BrahmaJyoti, the light of the self. And this higher aspect is called SadaShiva, Mount Kailash. So SadaShiva is a higher aspect of Lord Shiva. His wife or consort is goddess Maha Gayatri. It is a higher form of Parvati. And Mount Kailash is their abode. Mount Kailash is an important place because it is considered as one of the most sacred mountains on earth. The most sacred mountain on earth. It is in Himalayan ranges close to Tibet, China, and Nepal. Coming back to the chart, the graph, we may see that SadaShiva is the entry into what is known ParBrahmanda, the place of 700 quadrillion universes. This particular map is of Krishna movement, where Krishna and Radha are at the very top of Brahmanda. And the highest Shakti, Swarupa Shakti, and the highest abode, Goloka Vrindavana, which is the crown chakra of the whole ParBrahmanda. So they have their own universe, Krishna and Radha. The same way the Shiva path, it has its own universe. And this universe in ParBrahmanda, it's called the place of ParamShiva, the highest aspect of Shiva tradition. And the highest tradition of this aspect is called Kashmir Shaivism. They go into more details of each aspect of Shiva, but as in everything else, they all tend to say that this aspect is the absolute, it's the highest. And then you find somebody else saying that SadaShiva is the highest. Then Kashmir Shaivism says that ParamShiva is the highest of the highest. However, knowing the divine cosmology, we know that even the ParamShiva was born. The whole ParBrahmanda was born. It was created by Sat Purush. Sat Purush created 16 original qualities. One of them is truth, but the name is not Shiva. The concept of Shiva originated much, much later, after Sat Purush has emanated 16 qualities, created the first levels of creation, and then the ParBrahmanda came into existence, into creation. So there we already have a mismatch of what is the highest of the highest. So Shiva Path is one of the key traditions on this planet. It is one of the major tracks that the souls traverse. But the problem is that if the disciples perform all the rituals in Shiva Lingam and Om Namah Shivaya and singing the songs and making all the rituals to Lord Shiva, the question is to which aspect of Shiva they're doing all of that. Now, it is known that Lord Shiva remains often in meditation. So then the question is, why does God, Lord Shiva, need to meditate if he is the highest God, supposedly? And on whom or on what does he meditate on? So Lord Shiva meditates on the higher aspect of God. He meditates essentially on Sat Purush. The ParamShiva meditates on Sat Purush, on the true God Supreme. And if we follow the Kashmir Shaivism, then we know that Shiva has a second part, which is Shakti. If we look at the ParBrahmanda or ParamShiva region, then there is the Param Shakti. So then we come to realize that all of that speaks primarily to the highest region of creation, which may appear and seem as absolute, but it is not. That highest region is the great light. It's the greatest light of all creation. But beyond that light is the true God. The best name given to that is Sat Purush, or Ekankar. Now, going a little bit more into the history, does Lord Shiva have a father? Yes, his father is Brahm, and his mother is goddess Durga. And he has two brothers, Brahman and Vishnu. They're three brothers. The same repeats in the higher regions, as above, so below. The SadaShiva has also the same corresponding brothers, mother and father. And even ParamShiva, we know that there are 8, 10 or more key paths of ParBrahmanda region. For example, Vishnu Path or Param Vishnu Path, which is a different way, and Vaheguru Path and so on. These are different paths of ParBrahmanda region. So apparently the Shiva path is not the only path. Ultimately, the highest father of Lord Shiva is Sat Purush in the highest respects. But then as we go down, the whole cosmology goes all the way down until our local universe. Is Lord Shiva immortal? No, he is not. He lives very long though, just like in the old days, a number 1,000 was a lot. So the crown chakra, which has 1,000 petal lotus, was considered as infinite chakra. But it's not infinite, it's 1,000 petal lotuses. And then re-adopted higher numbers, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions. So how old is Lord Shiva? Lord Shiva is actually 15 quadrillion, 240 trillion, 960 billion years old. Well, that is pretty infinite, isn't it, you would say? From our human perspective, that's infinite, immortal, basically. But from a higher cosmology, he is not immortal. He was born, he will die. Or maybe ascend in the best case. Lord Shiva is subject to the laws of creation. He is part of creation. His body is part of this universe that we live in. We may say that his body is one of the major parts of this whole universe. So we are breathing him. Our body is made of him partially, as well as of Brahman and Vishnu. He is part of us and we are part of him. This body is part of Lord Shiva. He is subject to the laws of creation. He represents one of the three forces of nature, Tamas guna. So those three forces create all dynamics in this universe. So Lord Shiva is 15 quadrillion, 240 trillion, and so on years old. Very old being indeed, but not immortal. If he is not immortal, if he has age, it means he was born. It means he will dissolve at the end of the great divine, in the divine eternity, in the ParBrahmanda region. His days came and will finish. The most famous mantra, Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Does that lead to salvation? Unfortunately, no. It aligns us to the Shiva path. It may help the soul to attain salvation from this universe. If we know about SadaShiva, a yogi may attain enlightenment of the first degree and may become liberated from this specific universe and enjoy the feet of the Lord Shiva in the higher aspect. And if the yogi goes further upwards to the ParamShiva, he may become liberated from all Brahmanda regions, but still be subject to the ParBrahmanda universes. Of course, every soul there is already enlightened to some degree, but still subject to those universes. So it is not a final liberation. So therefore, all the mantras associated to Lord Shiva are limited to some extent. There is an interesting story. Lord Shiva was actually living in this universe, on this planet. There are many stories of his physical presence. And during his physical presence, there is a story how there was a Shiva devotee called Bhasmagiri who worshipped Lord Shiva for 12 years. And he obtained a certain bracelet that can turn someone into ashes when it's placed on their head and when the word Brahman is said. And Bhasmagiri had a plan to scare Lord Shiva or even to kill him. And he wanted to marry his wife, Parvati, because she is very beautiful. So he thought that since he has this power to dissolve anyone into ashes, he made a plan to find Lord Shiva, put it on his crown, say the words, and marry his wife. Of course, it's an evil plot, but it was intercepted by Lord Vishnu, who got him into ecstatic dance and made him put the bracelet on his own head and say the words Brahman, and he turned himself into ash. But knowing this, Shiva was very afraid because he nearly died. Well, he had a physical body on this earth. He had a wife. They had 2 sons. There are many stories in Hinduism about their activities here on earth. So essentially, Lord Shiva represents an aspect of our universe. Tamaguna. He represents the aspect of destruction, dissolution, and truth in some way. And he has higher aspects, which then become somewhat difficult for devotees to figure out what is that they're worshipping, performing all the rituals to. But we may simply conclude that everything here is part of Shiva. Our bodies, this world, this planet, this cosmos, this universe is a part of the nature of Shiva. We experience him, we breathe him every day. And therefore, like everything else, we honor his presence, we honor his body, we honor our life. By knowing his aspects, we may rise up to his higher forms. There is a specific track, and many beings are aligned to the Shiva path. Many great yogis are aligned to the Shiva path. One of the greatest yogis, his name is Mahavatar Babaji. He is aligned to the ParamShiva Path. Haidakan Babaji is part of the Shiva path. More recently, Adida Samraj is part of the Shiva path. Every 8th or 10th person on this earth, when they awaken spiritually, they are aligned to the Shiva path. It is one of the major paths that we ascend because we are within this creation, within this universe. We obtained our vehicles of consciousness in these regions. So we have summarized that Shiva is one of the major paths that we ascend. There are higher forms. We may go as high as to ParBrahmanda passage. Of all the passages of ParBrahmanda, at the very, very top is the supreme light, the supreme guru. Beyond that supreme guru, there is the great causal nature, the great, great void, and the nature of creation of all ParBrahmanda regions. Beyond that are the gateways to the divine, to the feet of the Lord, Supreme Being, Supreme God, Sat Purush. As I said, every one of you belongs to one of those paths, whether you know it or not. Another major path is the Buddha path, and it unfolds in a different way. And the Vishnu path, and the Vaheguru path, and I can name you more precisely the ParBrahmanda paths, which is Parameshwara plane, then the Shiva plane or ParamShiva plane, the Buddha plane with all the Buddha heavens and all the deities of Buddhism, the Parabrahman plane, the Shankara plane, the Vishnu plane, and the Allah plane, the Islamic heavens, the Orsmat plane, the Vaheguru plane, and the Omkara plane. These are the highest planes of the ParBrahmanda regions. Below, there are Brahmanda regions. They're more limited in some ways, but they have their reflections in all our major world religions and traditions. Kashmir Shaivism is more extensive in many ways. Shiva is the main deity of Hinduism. Actually, Shiva is one of the most worshipped lords on this earth. As we have traveled many places in India, most ashrams and statues are in honor of Shiva, actually. So it's one of the most popular paths in a general sense. And the non-duality is somewhat offspring of this main path. It's a branch. And these days, the Neo-Advaita or the Neo Vedanta is even further branch with even more simplifications. Neo means like a more modern or less traditional. So it's an offshoot of the traditional Advaita Vedanta into more simplified version of non-duality, which is now growing in its popularity in the West. Westerners prefer things which are simplified. The Westerners have the most complex egos and minds, and yet they like the most simplified, dummified version of spirituality. This is the paradox. Like these popular book series, the Bible for Dummies. Now, of course, some of you may say, but Mindo, why do we need to know these things? It's so complicated. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Well, that's how you learn. And you may say, oh, you're using so many Sanskrit words and the Hindu words and other words that are hard to follow. But that's how you learn. That's how you hear about it. That's how you start to gain some understanding. And I have spent considerable amount of time exploring all the beginner's paths and the intermediate paths and the advanced paths and the universal paths, and then opening to Shiva consciousness, BrahmaJyoti, and then above and above and above, so that like a GPS, I can guide you and help you. Of course, each and one of you has a more specific path, a specific way. So sometimes what I speak of is not exactly your path, but that's how then you learn and find, well, what is exactly my path? Because one of those paths is your path. And bit by bit, you will learn and grasp, understand better different traditions, different paths. I have had a keen interest in the Buddhism, in the Shiva path, in the Bhakti path, in the many branches associated to all of these paths, the Ascension path, which is more of a New Age path, and other older traditional paths, and exploring Christianity and some of the more mystical Eastern paths, Zen, Tibetan Buddhism, even shamanism, and many things I explored. So probably whatever you would be interested in to some extent, I will already have explored it and can give you guidance upwards. There are many branches, but all these branches then go back into the trunk. And this trunk of the tree is the divine sound, current, the column of light of the source. From this trunk, there are many branches, sub-branches, and leaves, but it all goes back in the same way. And then from the trunk, it goes into the roots, which is the divine regions, the very foundations of